The heavy metal door slid shut with a deep clang that echoed through the small room. General Calthera sat perfectly still in her chair, her blue-scaled hands cuffed to the metal table. Her 4 yellow eyes watched every movement as Admiral Robert Harrison walked into the room. The human officer carried a data pad and a cup of coffee. The smell made the alien general wrinkle her nose. Harrison pulled out the chair across from her and sat down slowly. He was tired after the long journey from Earth, but he needed answers. The failed invasion of New Manchester had shocked everyone in human space. No one could understand why such a powerful alien army had retreated so quickly. "General Calthera," Harrison said in a calm voice. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." The alien general's mandibles clicked twice. It was her species' way of showing mild amusement. "I did not agree to anything, Admiral. I am your prisoner. But I will speak with you because what happened at New Manchester, it needs to be understood." Harrison opened his data pad and scrolled through the battle reports. "Your forces numbered over 2 million soldiers. Our colonial defense force had maybe 40,000 troops. You had better weapons, better ships, better everything. Yet after 3 days your entire army packed up and left." Calthera's 4 eyes narrowed slightly. "You make it sound simple, human. As if we simply decided to go home after a pleasant visit." She leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. "Do you want to know what really happened on your little colony world? Do you want to understand why the mighty Vortak Empire now issues warnings to stay away from human space?" "That's exactly what I want to know," Harrison replied. The alien general was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost thoughtful. "For 400 years, my people have conquered other species across this part of the galaxy. We have a system that works. We study the target world, we calculate the needed force, we attack with overwhelming numbers. Most species surrender before we even land troops." Harrison made notes on his pad. "But we didn't surrender." "No, you did not." Calthera's scaled fingers drummed against the table. "We expected your people to behave like every other species we have defeated. When faced with impossible odds, intelligent beings seek survival. They negotiate. They surrender. They try to preserve their lives and their civilization." The alien general looked directly at Harrison. "Your species did none of those things. From the very first moment of contact, you behaved in ways that made no sense to us." Harrison set down his stylus. "Can you be more specific?" Calthera closed her 4 eyes for a moment, as if remembering something unpleasant. "The morning our invasion began, my scouts reported something strange. Your defensive positions were set up wrong. Instead of hiding behind cover, your soldiers were standing in the open. They were making themselves easy targets." "Maybe they were inexperienced," Harrison suggested. "That is what we thought at first," the general continued. "But then we began our orbital bombardment. Standard procedure calls for defenders to seek shelter and wait for the attack to end. Your people did the exact opposite. They started shooting back." Harrison frowned. "Shooting back at orbital bombardment ships? With what?" "Small arms fire. Rifles. Weapons that could not possibly damage our vessels." Calthera's voice carried a note of confusion even now. "But that was not the strange part, Admiral. The strange part was that your soldiers were laughing while they did it." The human admiral looked up from his notes. "Laughing? Laughing, joking, calling out challenges to our ships. My bombardment captain reported that the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. He thought there was an error in his translation systems." Calthera shifted in her chair, her scales making soft scraping sounds against the metal. "Within the first 6 hours, we realized this would not be like our other conquests. Your Colonel James Mitchell sent a message to our command ship. He thanked us for providing his troops with target practice and invited us to land more soldiers so they could have more fun." Harrison couldn't help but smile slightly. That sounded exactly like something Mitchell would say. "You find this amusing?" Calthera observed. "This is part of what we could not understand. Your species treats warfare as if it were some kind of sport or game. But you also fight with deadly seriousness at the same time." The alien general continued her account. "By the end of the first day, my field commanders were sending confused reports. They had expected your defense lines to break under pressure. Instead, every human position became stronger as the fighting continued. Your soldiers were sharing food with wounded comrades while still firing at our troops." "That's standard battlefield behavior," Harrison said. "No, Admiral, it is not." Calthera's voice became more intense. "We have conquered 19 different species. When beings are under extreme stress, fighting for their lives, they focus only on survival. They do not maintain social bonds. They do not care for others. They certainly do not appear to be having a good time. The alien general paused to collect her thoughts. On the second day something happened that changed everything. One of your units was completely surrounded. They had no ammunition, no supplies, no hope of rescue. By every military standard in the galaxy, they should have surrendered. Harrison waited for her to continue. Instead, they fixed bayonets to their rifles and charged our positions while singing battle songs. They were smiling, Admiral. Even as plasma fire cut them down, they were smiling. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's life support systems. Finally, Harrison spoke. And that frightened you. Calthera's 4 eyes focused on him with laser intensity. Admiral Harrison, fear is too simple a word for what we experienced. What we saw was something that should not exist in a civilized galaxy. Calthera's claws scraped against the metal table as she continued her story. Admiral Harrison could see that remembering these events made the alien general uncomfortable. Her scales had darkened to a deeper blue, which he had learned was a sign of stress in her species. The second day of fighting began like any normal military operation, she said. My commanders reported that human resistance was weakening. We had destroyed several of their defensive positions during the night. Everything suggested the battle would end soon. Harrison took a sip of his coffee and waited for her to continue. Then Captain Sarah Thompson proved us wrong. Calthera's mandibles clicked rapidly. She commanded a small unit defending a supply depot near the city center. My tactical computers calculated that her position would fall within 2 hours when attacked by a full regiment. The alien general paused, her 4 eyes staring at something beyond the walls of the room. Captain Thompson held that depot for 18 straight hours against 5,000 of my best soldiers. When we finally broke through her perimeter, do you know what we found? What did you find? Harrison asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Your soldiers were having a meal together. In the middle of a war zone, while plasma bolts were flying overhead, they had arranged their emergency rations on makeshift tables. They were eating, talking, and laughing like they were at some kind of social gathering. Harrison made a note on his pad. Sarah Thompson had always been known for keeping morale high among her troops, even in the worst situations. But that was not the most disturbing part, Calthera continued. While they ate, they were also caring for their wounded comrades and maintaining their weapons. They had turned their defensive position into a combination field hospital, mess hall, and weapons maintenance station. It made no tactical sense. The alien general's voice grew quieter. My soldiers reported that the humans seemed completely unconcerned about the battle raging around them. They offered medical aid to our wounded troops who fell near their position. They shared their water with prisoners. And through it all, they kept fighting with deadly effectiveness. Harrison looked up from his notes. You found this behavior strange? Strange? Calthera's 4 eyes widened. Admiral, in 4 centuries of conquest, we have never encountered anything like it. When intelligent beings are under extreme combat stress, they focus only on immediate survival. They do not maintain social rituals. They do not care for enemies. They certainly do not appear to be enjoying themselves. The alien general shifted in her restraints. On the morning of the second day, Lieutenant David Wilson's unit demonstrated something even more incomprehensible. They had been surrounded during the night by one of our elite battalions. Standard military doctrine demanded that they attempt to break out or request rescue. But they didn't? Harrison asked. They did break out. But not in any way that made sense. Calthera's scales rippled with remembered confusion. Instead of finding the weakest point in our encirclement, they attacked our strongest position. And they did it while singing. Harrison paused his note-taking. Singing? Traditional human battle songs, our translators told us later. Lieutenant Wilson led his troops in a direct assault on our main battle line while they sang at the top of their voices. My commanders thought it was some kind of psychological warfare tactic. The alien general's mandibles clicked slowly. But as the attack continued, we realized they were not trying to intimidate us. They were singing because they genuinely seemed to be having a good time. They were enjoying the battle. Calthera leaned forward slightly. Do you understand how disturbing this was for my soldiers, Admiral? We come from a species that evolved as prey animals. We achieved intelligence by learning to avoid dangerous situations, not by running toward them with joy. Harrison nodded, beginning to understand the psychological impact on the alien forces. The afternoon brought even stranger behavior, the general continued. Sergeant Lisa Parker's squad had been cut off from their main unit. They had limited ammunition and no hope of resupply. Any reasonable military force would have attempted to conserve resources and wait for rescue. Let me guess, Harrison said. They didn't wait. They launched an immediate assault on our command post using their remaining ammunition in one coordinated attack. They moved through our defensive lines like they had been studying our positions for weeks instead of hours. And when they ran out of bullets, they continued fighting with knives and improvised weapons. Calthera's voice carried notes of both admiration and horror. Sergeant Parker herself reached our communication center and destroyed half our equipment before my guards could stop her. When they finally cornered her, she was smiling, "Admiral." She looked genuinely happy about what she had accomplished. The alien general paused to collect her thoughts. By the end of the second day, my field commanders were sending reports that made no sense. Human casualty rates were extremely high, but their morale remained perfect. Units that should have been demoralized and ineffective were fighting harder than when the battle began. Harrison looked up from his data pad. "What did your military advisors make of this?" They had no explanation. Our psychological warfare specialists had prepared fear tactics based on standard prey species responses. But your people seemed immune to intimidation. If anything, greater danger made them more enthusiastic about fighting. Calthera's four eyes focused intensely on Harrison. That night, my senior staff held an emergency meeting. For the first time in Vordak military history, we began to question whether we could win a battle through conventional means. Your soldiers were not behaving like any intelligent species we had ever encountered. The alien general's scales had darkened even further. We decided to implement maximum pressure tactics on the third day. We would use overwhelming force to crush your remaining defenses quickly and end this strange war. She looked directly at Harrison. That decision led to our greatest mistake. Calthera's breathing became slower and more deliberate as she prepared to continue her story. Admiral Harrison noticed that her four eyes kept darting toward the corners of the room, as if she expected something to emerge from the shadows. Even now, safe aboard a human ship, the alien general seemed nervous. "The third day began with what should have been our easiest victory," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We decided to hunt down the remaining human forces hiding in the forest outside the city. My commanders assured me this would be simple work." Harrison leaned forward slightly. The forest operations had been classified at the highest levels, and he was curious to hear the alien perspective. "I sent my best reconnaissance units into the woods," Calthera continued. "These were not ordinary soldiers, Admiral. They were elite hunters trained to track the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. They had successfully hunted the shadow cats of Velmer and the crystal spiders of Phanex. Nothing had ever escaped them." The alien general's claws made soft scratching sounds against the metal table. "Within 6 hours, I lost contact with 3 separate hunting parties. At first, we assumed equipment failure or communication problems. Then the reports started coming in from the surviving units." Harrison made careful notes as she spoke. The Human Special Forces operations in the forests had been led by Major Tom Bradley, one of Earth's most experienced wilderness warfare specialists. "My hunters reported that they were being hunted," Calthera said, her voice growing even quieter. "Major Bradley's reconnaissance teams had somehow turned the situation around. Instead of fleeing from superior forces, they were actively stalking my soldiers through terrain they had never seen before." The alien general paused, her mandibles clicking nervously. "You must understand, Admiral, my people evolved on plains worlds. Forests are not our natural environment. But your species seemed to move through those woods like they had lived there their entire lives." Harrison knew that human special forces trained in every possible terrain type, but he didn't interrupt the alien's account. "My surviving scouts described tactics that should have been impossible," Calthera continued. "Your soldiers would track our patrols for hours, learning their patterns and routines. Then they would strike with perfect timing when my troops were most vulnerable." The alien general's four eyes focused on Harrison with disturbing intensity. "But the hunting itself was not the worst part, Admiral. It was what your people did afterward that broke my soldiers' minds." "What do you mean?" Harrison asked. "They left messages," Calthera said. "Captain Emma Davis's team would take equipment from fallen Vordak warriors and arrange it in patterns throughout the forest. Our translators could not decode the meaning, but every soldier who saw these displays understood they were threats." The alien general shifted uncomfortably in her restraints. "More disturbing were the trophies. Your people would take small personal items from our dead and display them where my living soldiers would find them. Not as insults or warnings, but as if they were keeping score in some kind of game." Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. He had not known about the psychological warfare tactics being employed in the forest operations. "Within 12 hours, my elite hunting units were requesting immediate evacuation," Calthera continued. "These were warriors who had never shown fear in 4 centuries of conquest. But something about being hunted by your species triggered responses we did not know they possessed. The alien general's scales had turned an even darker shade of blue. My field medics reported symptoms they had never seen before. Constant alertness, inability to rest, jumping at every sound. Your human doctors would probably call these panic disorders. Harrison made more notes, beginning to understand the psychological impact of human tactics on species that had evolved as prey animals. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Stevens implemented the final phase of your forest campaign, Calthera said. His forces began broadcasting human war cries during their attacks. At first, we thought this was intended to frighten us. But we soon realized the truth was much worse. What truth? Harrison asked. Your soldiers were making those sounds because they were genuinely enjoying the hunt, the alien general replied. They were not trying to intimidate my troops. They were expressing their own excitement about the battle. Calthera's voice became strained. Do you understand what this meant for my soldiers, Admiral? They were being hunted by creatures that found the experience pleasurable. Every evolutionary instinct in their bodies was screaming at them to flee. The alien general looked directly at Harrison. My reconnaissance units began abandoning their missions without orders. Unit commanders reported complete breakdowns in discipline as soldiers refused to enter areas where human forces operated. Harrison felt a mix of pride and discomfort as he listened to the account. Human military effectiveness was something to be proud of, but the psychological damage being described seemed almost cruel. By the end of the third day, I had lost effective control over my ground forces, Calthera admitted. My soldiers would not follow orders that required them to engage your hunters directly. For the first time in Vorthak military history, our troops were refusing to fight. The alien general's mandibles clicked rapidly. That night, my senior commanders came to me with a request I had never heard before in 4 centuries of conquest. They asked permission to withdraw from the forest entirely and focus our remaining forces on orbital bombardment. She paused, her 4 eyes staring at the table. I realized then that we were not fighting a conventional enemy. Your species had turned warfare itself into a form of predation. And my people, no matter how advanced our technology, were still prey animals at heart. Calthera looked up at Harrison with something that might have been respect or fear. We decided to make one final attempt at victory using maximum force against your remaining stronghold in the city center. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. That decision destroyed us completely. The alien general's 4 eyes closed completely as she prepared to tell the most difficult part of her story. Admiral Harrison could see her scales trembling slightly, and he realized that even now, weeks after the battle, General Calthera was still affected by what she had witnessed. The 4th day was supposed to be our final victory, she said, her voice so quiet that Harrison had to lean forward to hear her. We had pulled back all our remaining forces from the forest and surrounding areas. 800,000 of my best warriors surrounded the last human stronghold in the city center. Harrison checked his notes. The final battle had taken place around the planetary government building, where General Patricia Woods had established her last command post with the surviving human defenders. General Woods commanded only 8,000 soldiers, Calthera continued. They were tired, low on supplies, and completely cut off from any possible rescue. My tactical computers calculated a 97% probability of human surrender within 4 hours. The alien general opened her 4 eyes and stared directly at Harrison. We sent the standard surrender demand at dawn. General Woods responded by broadcasting a message across all frequencies. She thanked us for gathering so many troops in one place because it would make the fighting more interesting. Harrison felt a familiar surge of pride. Patricia Woods had been his mentor at the military academy, and her aggressive style was legendary throughout human space. We assumed this was empty bravado, Calthera said. What could 8,000 exhausted defenders do against overwhelming force? We began our final assault expecting token resistance followed by quick surrender. The alien general's mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation that Harrison had learned to recognize. Instead of defending their positions and waiting for our attack, your people did something that violated every principle of military logic we understood. What did they do? Harrison asked. They attacked us, Calthera replied, her voice filled with disbelief even now. Colonel Andrew Clark led a breakout assault using every remaining human soldier in a coordinated offensive against our largest troop concentration. Harrison paused in his note-taking. A breakout assault against 800,000 enemy troops was either brilliant strategy or complete madness. But this was not a tactical withdrawal or fighting retreat, the alien general continued. Your forces were advancing directly into our strongest positions while broadcasting what our translators identified as ancient human war songs. They were singing while charging into certain death. Calthera's scales had turned the darkest blue Harrison had ever seen. Captain Michelle Roberts led a cavalry charge using actual horses against our main battle line. Horses, Admiral. Against plasma weapons and energy shields. She was riding straight toward our heaviest guns while laughing loud enough for my forward observers to hear her over the weapon's fire. The alien general's voice cracked slightly as she continued. My field commanders sent urgent requests for clarification. They could not understand why the humans were behaving this way. Some of my officers thought your people had been driven insane by the stress of battle. Harrison remained silent, allowing her to continue the account. Major Chris Johnson's artillery unit continued firing even after our forces had overrun their position, Calthera said. His gunners were operating their weapons manually while enemy soldiers were literally climbing over their equipment. They kept shooting until the moment they died. The alien general paused to collect herself. Sergeant Katie Williams used her own body to shield wounded comrades while still operating her weapon system. When my soldiers finally reached her position, she had been mortally wounded for over an hour but was still fighting. Harrison felt his chest tighten as he listened to the account of his people's final battle. The complete absence of self-preservation instincts was unlike anything in our military experience, Calthera continued. Every species we had conquered showed normal survival behavior when faced with overwhelming odds. They would surrender, retreat, or at least attempt to preserve their lives for future resistance. The alien general's 4 eyes focused intently on Harrison. Your soldiers did none of these things. They fought as if death was merely another tactical option rather than something to be avoided. And through it all, they maintained the same enthusiasm we had observed throughout the entire campaign. Calthera's voice became strained. By midday, something unprecedented happened in Vortak military history. My own soldiers began refusing direct orders to advance against human positions. Unit after unit reported that they could not psychologically handle engaging enemies who seemed to welcome combat casualties. Harrison looked up from his notes. Your soldiers were afraid? Fear is too simple a word, the alien general replied. What my troops experienced was a complete psychological breakdown triggered by exposure to human combat behavior. We are descended from prey species that achieved intelligence through careful risk assessment and avoidance of dangerous situations. She leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. Watching creatures that had evolved as pack hunters treat lethal combat as an enjoyable challenge activated every survival instinct in my soldiers' genetic memory. They could not function while observing such behavior. Calthera's mandibles clicked slowly. My command staff began abandoning their posts without permission. Battalion commanders reported that their units were simply walking away from the battlefield rather than continue fighting humans who appeared to be having fun while dying. The alien general's voice dropped to barely a whisper. By late afternoon, I realized that we had lost the battle not through military defeat, but through complete psychological collapse of our forces. My soldiers were no longer capable of fighting your people. She looked directly at Harrison with something that might have been respect or terror. That evening, I issued the withdrawal order that ended the Vortak invasion of human space. But Admiral, you must understand that this decision was not based on tactical considerations. Calthera's 4 eyes seemed to stare through the walls of the room. We retreated because we finally understood what humanity represents in this galaxy. General Calthera straightened in her restraints, her 4 eyes taking on the formal intensity that Admiral Harrison had learned meant she was about to deliver an official statement. The alien general's scales had returned to their normal blue color, but her mandibles still clicked nervously as she prepared to speak. Admiral Harrison, she began, her voice carrying the weight of military protocol. What I am about to tell you represents the official assessment of the Vortak High Command regarding humanity's place in galactic civilization. Harrison set down his stylus and gave her his complete attention. This was the moment he had been waiting for throughout the entire interrogation. The Vortak Empire did not retreat from New Manchester because we were defeated in conventional military terms, Calthera said, her words measured and deliberate. Our withdrawal was ordered because we finally understood what your species truly represents in this galaxy. The alien general paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. For over 4 centuries, we have studied and conquered 19 different intelligent species across 63 worlds. Each of these civilizations followed predictable patterns based on their evolutionary origins. Harrison leaned forward slightly, sensing that this was the crucial information he needed to understand humanity's future in space. Every sapient species we encountered achieved intelligence through one of two evolutionary paths, Calthera explained. Most, like my own people, evolved from prey animals. We developed advanced brains to avoid predators, assess risks, and survive through careful planning and superior numbers. The alien general's 4 eyes focused intently on Harrison. The remaining species evolved from solitary predators. They achieved intelligence to become better hunters, but they retained the individual territorial instincts of their ancestors. They compete more than they cooperate. Harrison made careful notes as she spoke, beginning to understand the significance of her words. Your species is completely different from anything we have encountered in our expansion across this region of space, Calthera continued. Humanity evolved from pack-hunting predators while developing advanced cooperative intelligence. You combine the aggressive instincts of apex hunters with the social coordination abilities of hive-minded species. The alien general's voice carried notes of both fascination and concern. We studied your military history before beginning our invasion. 10,000 years of continuous warfare between human nations and tribes. 10,000 years of your people fighting opponents exactly as intelligent, creative, and ruthless as yourselves. Harrison felt a chill as he realized the implications of her words. Every human military doctrine, every tactical innovation, every strategic development was tested against enemies who could adapt and respond with equal intelligence, Calthera said. Your entire approach to warfare was refined through competition with creatures just like yourselves. The alien general's mandibles clicked slowly. We believed our technological superiority would compensate for this experience. We thought that advanced weapons and overwhelming numbers would give us the same advantages they had provided against every other species. She leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. We were catastrophically wrong, Admiral. Your people do not fight merely to achieve military objectives or ensure survival. Something in your genetic programming makes warfare itself stimulating and enjoyable. Harrison remained silent, allowing her to continue her analysis. Colonel Bradley, Captain Davis, Major Stevens, General Woods, every human commander we encountered displayed the same fundamental characteristics, Calthera said. They approached combat with deadly seriousness while simultaneously appearing to genuinely enjoy the experience. The alien general's voice became more intense. This combination of advanced intelligence, pack coordination, and predatory enthusiasm creates a psychological effect on other species that transcends simple military defeat. Prolonged exposure to human combat doctrine fundamentally alters how other beings think about conflict. Harrison looked up from his notes. What do you mean by that? Your warriors are infectious, Admiral, Calthera replied, her 4 eyes wide with something approaching fear. Extended contact with human military thinking could change how my people approach warfare. We might begin to adopt your aggressive tactics and predatory mindset. The alien general's scales rippled with visible distress. The Vortak High Command has issued a general quarantine order regarding all human space. Not because your technology poses a threat to our civilization, but because your entire approach to conflict represents an evolutionary contamination risk. Harrison felt a mixture of pride and concern as he processed her words. We fear your armies not because of the physical damage they might inflict, Calthera continued, but because of what learning from them might do to us. Exposure to human military doctrine could transform my people from careful, intelligent prey animals into aggressive pack hunters like yourselves. The alien general's voice took on an almost philosophical tone. Every species in this galaxy achieved sapience by moving away from their violent evolutionary origins. Prey animals developed intelligence to avoid predators. Solitary predators developed intelligence to reduce the need for risky hunting. She looked directly at Harrison with disturbing intensity. Humanity is the only species that achieved advanced intelligence while retaining and refining your predatory instincts. You did not evolve away from violence. You evolved to become better at it. Calthera's mandibles clicked rapidly as she delivered her final assessment. The Vortak Empire chooses to remain intelligent prey animals with superior technology rather than risk becoming predators. We will not allow our civilization to be corrupted by exposure to human military thinking. The alien general straightened in her chair, her voice taking on the formal tone of an official declaration. Admiral Harrison, humanity has been classified as an evolutionary anomaly that poses a fundamental threat to galactic civilization. Not through conquest or destruction, but through the infectious nature of your approach to warfare. She paused, her 4 eyes reflecting something that might have been respect or terror. We do not fear what your people might do to us, Admiral. We fear what we might become if we learn to think like you. The interrogation room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's engines as Harrison absorbed the full implications of her confession.